Folks, did you hear and see that? So what do you think that ripping, searing, beautiful noise was? Was it an R1? Was it a Fireblade? Maybe a Hayabusa? Would you believe it if I told you that what you've just witnessed was a Crossflow? Can't believe it? Neither could I until I got to know our next guest, Dave Gemzoe. Dave, how are you?
Hi, Jim. I'm not bad. How are you?
I'm doing good. Dave, you represent Gemzoe Motorsport and Bespoke Engineering, right?
Yep, that's right.
I'm just getting the business part out of the way, so let's get up on with that. So you've got a website. Is it www.gemzoe.com?
Yep, that's it, yeah.
Just like it says on that T-shirt.
That is true, yes.
Yeah, all right. And you've got a Facebook page, which is www.facebook.com Gemzoe Motorsport, correct?
That's it, yep.
Awesome. Just in case people want to track you down. And finally, one old school way of reaching people is to pick up the phone. So that's 44 78 84 432 125.
That's right, yeah.
Awesome.
Phone's always good.
Oh, good. I've done a bit of my homework.
Yeah.
So I got to know you through 7Spot, of course, and I was really quite taken with this, what you can do with the Crossflow. And I didn't know an awful lot about Crossflows because I live over in in the colonies in Canada, and although we do have Crossflows in Caterhams, it's not a common engine over here.
Yeah.
And so I had to look up in Wikipedia to find out a bit about it, and I was really quite taken aback. Of course, it's, in my opinion, an engine that is clinging to the last century.
Yes, very much so, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a cast iron block overhead valve engine. And as I read from pre-Crossflow days, it was about 1,000cc engine that put out about 39 horsepower. Is that about right? And
yeah, they did the pre-Crossflows, which had the inlet and the exhaust manifold on the same size.
Yeah.
And they were doing, and the small ones are 1,100cc's, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know an awful lot about the Caterham engine, but according to Wikipedia, they seem to indicate that the Crossflow in motor trim was putting out about 111, 115 horsepower. Is that about right?
That's about right, yeah. They did the 1600, and then there was the Sprint engine and the Super Sprint engines. So I think the Super Sprint was the 1700 as standard.
Yeah.
They did the GT spec engine as well, which was into the high 80s, low 90s.
Yeah, that's
like
right too. Yeah,
on a downdraft DJV.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, quite lowly spec things. That was the same sort of thing that was in the original Capris and the Escorts and stuff. Awesome.
And those engines, being that they're overhead valve engines, where would they have spec'd out in terms of the high end on their RPM?
Well, I've pushed them to 10,500 before.
Yeah.
It's not minded that. Trying to go much higher, I think you're going to struggle with valve control as much as anything else.
Uh-huh. But when the engines, before they get into Dave Gemzoe's hands, how much would they be? About a 5,000, 6,500 RPM range?
They're around in standard trim. I think they're a bit short of 6, I think.
Yeah. That's kind of
time since I've looked at something very standard like that.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. As you know, I'm a bike guy, much to your chagrin, and I have a 1300cc Gen 1 Hayabusa in my 7, and it puts out roughly 160 horsepower and 10,500 RPM. And you just mentioned you get yours to rev up to 10,000. First off, I got to find out why. The big question, why? What possessed you to take on the Crossflow?
Well, when I first bought my Caterham, it was spec'd with a Crossflow in it.
Yeah.
And I think that was predominantly down to finances. It was a way of actually getting into the car in the first place. There was a lot of room for manoeuvre with the Crossflow.
Okay.
And then when you get further into it and you look at developing engines and developing components and the likes for them, you find that a Crossflow's only got 8 valves, whereas if I went to a K series or a Duratec or anything, now we've got 16 valves.
Yeah.
So if I'm running bespoke valves and I'm testing the angles of the backs of the valves and what you can get away with on stems, it costs me half the money to do that and know what you can get away with, which is then applicable to all the other engines. So essentially it works out a very cheap test bed. So that's the main reason it's been run for quite so long.
Perfect. Well, and just to give us an idea, I mean, you get these things to put out about 10,000 RPM without being pushed too hard. But obviously, you have an engineering background. I mean, you are not only in motorsport, but you are bespoke engineering. What kind of things would you have to take out of that ancient engine to change to make it work with to that degree?
I think in essence the only thing I'd keep would be the block. We can go on the heads, but we're running alley heads now, which are just the lighter. It gets the weight down, so it makes a huge difference. There's that. An alley block would be nice, but we're talking another £4,000.
Yeah, and
so,
I was just looking up I mean, you can't now. These parts are pretty much bespoke anyway, because it's hard to find parts for these engines. I was just looking online today, and I mean, you have to go to Ford Performance Parts to find a block, and it's like in American dollars, it's $1,700 US.
Yeah, they've started remanufacturing them, I think, for the Formula Fords.
Mm-hmm.
So they're made in a lot better quality material now, which is good. Seeing as though the last one I've had has just cracked on us, which was one of the AX blocks, which a lot of people rave about because it's a thick wall block. But I've found the casting quality isn't quite as good in them, and I've cracked it. So that made a real mess of it all. So now it all needs to go back again, and it's going back on a 711. The new blocks are a different material again, it's still iron, but it's a lot better quality iron now. There are people who remanufacture the BD blocks, because essentially the BD engines were run on the Crossflow blocks in the first place, just pretty much like the Lotus twin cams, which would be a shorter version. It's more pre-Crossflow sort of height, but the 5 bearings. And then you get into the things like the FVAs, which is a similar sort of idea to the BD engines, but it's a little bit different. And they have room to put the push rods into them, whereas the BD engines don't have the space to be able to do that on them. So there is ways of doing it still, but you're talking an awful lot of money to be able to do it. So there is more possible than what I've done out of it, but I simply don't have the money to put into it to find out.
So I'm just going to say, I'm looking at your website here, and it says here that you are, of course, Gemzoe Motorsport, but you are engine builders. Now, do you offer pre-built engines for people, or is your business about people bringing their cars to you and doing bespoke work on the cars?
Yeah, quite often. If I'm honest, I can't ever remember selling a complete engine ready to go to somebody. You usually bring your engine in, and we modify what you've got.
Okay.
Because often people have already got their engine, and if I'm to source for a Crossflow, again, for instance, if I'm to source another block, things like push rods in the 1600s are very awkward to get hold of these days. So if you need to find them and put them all in, or if I use what I'm running now, which would be a gun-drilled chromoly push rod, which is a lot stiffer, it's a lot more money. And you look at all the components new, and you're machining them all to fit and do everything, then the price it's going to double on you.
Wow.
So more often than not, somebody's going to bring their engine in and say, I want to do this. And people generally don't say, I've got this wild spec of engine, can you build me it? They usually say, I've got this engine, how much further can you take it for this budget? So
I got
that's usually what we're up against.
Perfect. And obviously, it says here that you've got a rolling road, so it's obvious that you've been what kind of horsepower your engine has been putting out. So mind sharing that?
That comes down to the state of tune that you want it in, and how reliable you want it to be, and how easy it is to use. So as a wheel figure, I've seen, was it 196 out of it, the wheels.
Wow.
But to achieve that, it is such a pain to make the thing start. Bear in mind that this is running on carbs as well.
Yeah.
So if you run it up at them sort of RPMs, then the carb's got to be so large that when it's turning over on the starter motor, the airflow is so slow and you don't get much signal to the jet, so it's really struggling to pull any fuel in.
Yeah.
So you have to rely on pump jets.
Yeah.
And then to get the cam timing in the right position, the starter motor will struggle to turn it unless the throttle plates are turned open by about a quarter of the way. And you'll get an awful lot of standoff. If it cracks back through the carb when you try and restart it, so if you've spun off on track and it stalls and you try and restart it, the chances of it igniting the inside of the fuel filter, if you're using a foam one, which mine does, you've got a good chance of setting fire to the thing. So I found out that, you know, you're better off running it with slightly less power and making it so you can actually start it. So usually you find the first start of the day is the problem to get it warmed up. Once it's warmed up, then it'll be easy enough to do. So normally I would jump start it off another car so you don't drain the main battery down. And then after that, you're fine. But that first start, you could be at it for an hour. Whereas you might have missed your meeting by that point. So do you want that extra sort of 8 horsepower when you might actually not get to race at all? So you've got to weigh these things up. So I think in the tune that I've generally run it in, we're looking at around about the 185 at the wheels. And at them RPMs, we're losing roughly 25 to 30 horsepower through the gears and the wheels.
Wow. That's an amazing, amazing thing. Who would have thought it from a Crossflow?
Well, yeah.
Well, you know, I'm going to say, folks, we've got lots and lots of video footage to share with you about the amazing stuff that Dave does. And but once again, Dave, if anybody's wanting to look you up, what's the best way that they should try to call you up?
The phone number's the easiest way to have a chat, and it saves you going to and fro with emails for the next week.
Wonderful.
They usually get quite in-depth to emails often, so the phone number is 0788 44 32125. So that's a UK one, so you'd put a 44 in front and get rid of the 0, I guess.
Yeah, okay.
And if you want to email me, you can, which is dave@gemzoe.com.
Yep.
And you can use the messenger service via Facebook, and that's from Gemzoe Motorsport on Facebook. Yep. And if you just want to see what we're doing, then a few bits and pieces of what we're up to on a day-to-day basis. If it's remotely interesting, I'll go on Facebook if I get the time.
Yeah.
And other than that, the general stuff you'll find on the website, which is gemzoe.com.
Awesome. Dave, for 7 Spot, I'm going to say thanks a lot.
No problem.
I can't speak for everybody else, but I am amazed, and I've learned a lot. So I'm going to say thanks again.
No problem. We'll wait for the next generation of engines, because we've been talking today actually about a new engine that we're looking at and the sort of potential in this. So if we can squeeze it into the 7, then yeah, there's some interesting things coming there as well.
Well, I'm
usual touch of extremeness.
I'm going to get offline now, and I'm going to talk to you separately about that, because that could be our next show.
You never know.
All right. Cheers again. Thanks so much.
All right. No problem.
Bye for now.